Deputy Thomas Broughan. Your slot is a 10-minute slot you're sharing with Deputy Roisin Shortall, I understand, at 5 minutes each. And proceed.
Recently, Minister, I had an opportunity to speak briefly on television about the housing crisis, and I mentioned, of course, that back when we were really poor, Cathaoirleach, in the late 20s, 1930s, early 1940s, we built 50 and 60,000 social housing units. When this country had no money whatsoever, we were able to have a major social housing programme. Despite what happened to our country from 2008-9, and Minister, unfortunately, which you have supported from 2011, and the Deputy behind me, unfortunately, despite that, I believe we do have the resources to mount a major social housing programme. We had, as you know, Cathaoirleach, in the mid-late 1980s, under the McSharry and Haughey cuts, the disgraceful Fianna Fáil government of the late 1980s and early 1990s began the total abandonment of a social housing programme. And this was carried on by Fine Gael-led governments and later by the Fianna Fáil government, the long Fianna Fáil government. They totally abandoned any social housing programme and totally, if you like, abandoned the achievements of their forebears in the 1930s. And once again today, we're left, Cathaoirleach, with a very serious housing crisis, with housing lists of 90 to 100,000 people, or as the Minister told me recently, with 78,000 in rent support, in rent supplement. An astonishing crisis, Minister. And of course, I also suggested that you yourself should be a full Cabinet Minister with a full Department of Housing, because however one thinks about it, housing is perhaps one of the most important social and personal goods, economic goods, of any human being or any family. And we needed to have at this government, and particularly for ministers who would call themselves Labour ministers, to be able to take vigorous action to respond to the crisis we can see, and every deputy in this House knows intimately.
Housing and the government's homelessness policy. Deputy Tommy Broughan has 2.5 minutes left.
Thanks, Cian. Well, as I was saying this morning, obviously the overall reliance by the Minister and her department on the private sector to plug the incredible gap and the lack of supply in social housing, it's been a total failure, Minister, and it's particularly acute when we look at the current situation in the rental accommodation scheme. In Dublin City, for example, as the Minister well knows, the RAS scheme has collapsed. I've been informed by the housing manager, Dick Brady, that 101 landlords exited the scheme in 2013. A further 54 requested to leave it. I've had numerous constituents approach me in situations where they've been in RAS and their landlords are now selling their home. So these families are now effectively left homeless, Minister, with nowhere to go, with perhaps only 5 or 6 new RAS properties becoming available to date this year in 2014. Rent supplement, of course, is a vital support, but it's only a short to medium-term measure, and persons in receipt of rent supplement, the 78,000 I referred to this morning, don't, of course, have security of tenure. Now, you propose to introduce a housing assistance payment, to moving it into from the Department into the Department of Social Protection. That would be welcome, I think, but I think you're only doing it at present, Minister, on a very small pilot basis in your own city of Limerick. The homeless policy statement, your policy statement of February 2013, spoke of a housing-led approach. But that's incredible in a situation where only 4,500 to 5,000 social housing units are proposed to come on stream even this year. And you told me recently in a PQ, of course, of the 4,725 units you stated that are to become available, 2,500 are proposed to come from RAS. But that just seems frankly unbelievable, Minister, particularly in Dublin City, where there are over 4,200 people and families on the housing waiting list in the north central area in Dublin Bay North of my own constituency. You've also talked about ending homelessness by 2016, but the recent rough sleeper count in November showed 94 people homeless. I've had people, for example, who are living for over a year, families in homeless accommodation, desperately waiting for you to take action to give them a home. And we know, in fact, from other research that's been done by Simon and others, that perhaps up to 4,000 people are homeless. We've had continuing difficulties, I think, with the shared ownership scheme now, where householders are in negative equity and where essentially families are trapped. And recently, of course, Dublin City, we've moved to a time on the list system, and it's been shocking to see that families and individuals are 10, 12, 14, 15 years on the list and still are not being rehoused by the City of Dublin or by Fingal County Council. So I want to say in conclusion, Minister, I agree with Focus Ireland that a minimum of 9,000 to 10,000 social housing units are urgently necessary per annum to start working on the large housing list, and perhaps we need 25,000 to 30,000 houses generally to work back up to that. We had 8,000 last year, Minister, as you know, and 8,000 in your first year in office. So at all costs, we need to create, Laskencorla, a stable and sustainable housing market without any more bubbles or severe shortages, which only enrich the developer and landlord class. And unfortunately, the record of the Fine Gael Labour government on housing is deplorable, and you need to take action, Minister, urgently, whatever time you have left. Thanks.